Let's come to another contradiction wherein we check at the strength of the gravity itself. It is said that of the four forces in the universe which run the universe, gravity is the weakest. If you take the stronger interaction, which is the chemical bond between the molecules, if that is one unit, the gravity would be 1 divided by 10 to the power 39. It's so weak that at molecular level it ceases to exist. You cannot measure it. Its influence cannot be seen because of its weakness. And to give you a perspective, you take a tear, you take a drop of water. There are many millions of water molecules. Pick out only the hydrogen bond between the two hydrogen atoms. Put them in one side of the scale, and on the other side you put the entire planet's gravity, the force of gravity. It is equivalent to that. So you can imagine this is how weak the gravity is. And when it comes to the race of the universe between all these, it is gravity which gets the top bill. Gravity is the one which is supposed to create all these massive masses, despite being the weakest force of the four ones. So what is being implied is, generally you see when you have an input, you have a process, you have an output. If you want an output which is violent, and these are all violent structures, you have stars which have violent plasma, you have planets which are having molten core, so these are violent outputs. To have a violent output, one of these should be violent. Either the input is violent, strong, very strong, or the process is violent. But what we see here is, to begin with, either in the early universe or later stage, it just was hot static gas. No kinetic energy, just hot static gas. And we are saying that the weak force, that is gravity, is coalescing all this matter. Time is the only thing which is massive here. And this ends up violent structures like this. Not just violent, non-uniform structures.
That is fine as long as you had early universe where there was no matter. But now when the matter came, matter was formed, we say that gravity being the weakest force, that cannot be the reason for creating such violent structures as galaxies, stars with plasma core, or planets with molten core. But if gravity is the weakest force, so is S2. And since S1 is not imparting any kinetic energy to the mass, even S1 is of no use. And S3 exists only when the mass is in motion. But what we have is just hot static gas in either case. So how is it? So even S1, S2, S3 will not be able to explain. If gravity cannot explain, even spacity cannot explain how a weak force can have an output which is violent structures. So it has to be a force other than spacity or gravity that can create a violent force. What could that be? So to begin with, we had hot and static gaseous mass. It could be either nebular stage or the early universe. What we should understand is that it is highly ionized. At the temperature that we are talking about, all these masses are ionized, and we know whenever mass is ionized, there is an electric discharge happening, just like it happens in the lightning. So we know that lightning has got violent capacity, and this electric discharge imparts kinetic energy to the mass. Our idea is to find out how did the mass start moving. Once the mass came into being, what made it move? So this could be a possible reason why these discharge was the reason why the masses started moving. And when you have these, but that is not the end of it. How do these discharges give you a structure like a star or a galaxy? So when you have these charges, they could be haphazard, or there could be accumulation. These are only two chances. If it is haphazard, forget about it. It goes haywire. If there is accumulation of these discharges, it's like building a rope out of threads. So you have a primary discharge which is taken shape, and that is moving the masses along with it. And whenever you have a discharge, it can never be a straight line. It will have a radius of curvature. And even if it is a straight line is nothing but circumference of diameter with infinite radius. So when you have this curvature of arc, if it is acute, it would move the mass locally, leading to a formation of a star. If it is gentler, going farther and farther, that would lead to a galaxy, a future galaxy. But most important is that the discharge, whichever way that it is going, it has to turn directions. In case of curvature of radius where it is lesser, where the mass is going to be a star, it is fine. It can come back being a sphere, or circle or ellipse. But how is it that it happens at galactic levels? That is because the turn of direction is facilitated when this discharge reaches the end of nebula or the void that is between the early universe. The discharge would not cross over through the void. Maybe the void is farther. So that is when the discharge, primary discharge, would be forced to turn, and that turn would make it come back. Wherever it is unable to cross over that nebular mass or the void, it would come back to where it possibly started. And that is how you have a galaxy, the seeds of galaxy formation shown. So when you have a circular fashion or an ellipse formed, it would have a plane. It would have, when you have a plane, it would have an axis. It would have a tilt also, and that is why we see different galaxies in different tilt or angles that we see. And this would in turn decide what is the size of the galaxy and what is the type of future body, whether it is going to be a barred galaxy, non-barred galaxy, spiral galaxy, elliptical galaxy. All those possibilities would happen. And once the movement of the masses happens, you have centrifugal forces. Spacity, which is S2 and S3, would flatten the disk, and as we understand, the formation of the stars and the galaxy would keep happening. Now we also know that there is a black hole in the center. Possibly that could be because when you have a primary discharge which is creating an ellipse or a circle, it would not be able to affect the mass in the center. So the mass in the center, it would also have its own discharges, but the mass being huge at the center, it may lead to a huge mass and the black holes forming. And the other possibility is that the black holes do not just form at the center, they can form in the inner ring, in the spiral arms. So when those black holes form, they have an option either to leave the galaxy or sink in or slide in towards the center. It cannot go out for the very reason of spacity. It has to keep all the masses, so it is pushing it towards the center. And plus the S3, which is acting on black holes, it's a general the average S3 in the mass would not be good enough to move the black hole the way it moves the stars. It would not have that force. So the chances are that all these black holes which are formed in the galaxy would slide towards the center, like in a sink. But after this, Manthan does not deviate from the classical model of universe with respect to the planetary disk, how the stars, moons are formed. So we do not go into that factor. We are only limiting ourselves to the reason of movement of the masses is not gravity, or formation of these galaxies not gravity, neither is it spacity, but the electric discharge which is happening. So as we had said earlier, when you have a weak input, hot static gas, you cannot have a weak process to have a violent output. So now that the weak process of gravity is replaced by electric discharge, this still is a possibility.